Good afternoon and welcome to another session of sharing ideas, experiences, difficulties, challenges that we find in our classroom every single day. And we would like to start with a question today. How do teachers in general see the generation of today's students? What labels do they carry? We hear so many comments, don't we? They are the ready-made generation. They want everything done for them. They don't like having to think about stuff. They only want fast, ever-changing visual information as they are used to having on their phone. They have poor attention span. They can't be focused for more than a couple of minutes. They show signs of emotional instability. We all have heard this, I'm sure, and more in the corridors, in the teacher's room, everywhere. So I guess Calvin comic strip may portray a bit of that picture of students who are not willing to put that much effort into schoolwork. However, do we ever ask yourselves where this lack of motivation to learn comes from? Is this really a generational issue? What is school not giving them? Maybe this generation has changed so quickly that school couldn't keep up. Because we all agree that the 21st century generation of teens has changed. They grew up differently, exposed to a huge amount of stimuli in different family environments, and that must have an impact on the way they process learning. So if 21st century learning has changed, shouldn't 21st century teaching keep up? And are we ready? What will that imply? Taking a new degree? Maybe we don't need to go that far. Changing the way we teach? Probably a little bit, but not radically, just readjusting some practices. We just have to understand how to do it. Rethinking our role as a teacher in the classroom. Well, we'll always be a teacher, but we may need to reassess our role, and that is, after all, the story of our life. Okay, our role and practices may need to be adjusted, but of course, we will never lose sight of our goal to provide meaningful and successful learning to engaged and motivated students. This realization that students maybe aren't provided with a school environment that fosters engagement, or on the other hand, that school isn't providing them with the skills they need to be successful in their future professional lives. This realization, as I was saying, may be at the origin of the buzz term that showed up in education over the last few years, and our topic for today's session, the 21st century skills, sometimes interchangeable with soft skills or transferable skills. And while there is flexibility in how these skills are interpreted, there are four main learning skills, the 4 Cs, that are regarded as the core skills and that we will be dealing with in more detail ahead. And maybe, just maybe, we may suggest other Cs. We'll see. Then we have literacy skills, the next category of 21st century skills, each concerned with a different element in digital comprehension. The 3 21st century literacy skills are information literacy, media literacy, and technology literacy. So starting with information literacy, this will help students understand facts, especially data points that they will encounter online. More importantly, it teaches them how to separate fact from fiction. And in an age of information, finding truth online is crucial so that students can identify what is true and what is not. Next, we have media literacy, the ability to understand and identify publishing methods, publishing outlets, sources, while distinguishing between the ones that are credible and the ones that are not. Just like the previous skill, media literacy is helpful for finding truth in a world that's saturated with information. And this is how students may find trustworthy sources of information, because without it, anything that looks credible becomes credible. The last one, technology literacy. And as computers, cloud programming, and mobile devices have become more and more important, the world needs more and more people to understand them. And technology literacy gives students the basic information that they need to understand what gadgets perform, what tasks, and why. But to truly round out the students' 21st century skills, they need to learn from a third category, life skills. These skills are part of someone's personal life, of course, but they are also carried into professional settings. The 5 21st century skills are flexibility, leadership, initiative, productivity, and social skills. So starting with flexibility. So flexibility is the expression of someone's ability to adapt to changing circumstances. This is probably the most challenging skill to learn for students because it is based on two very uncomfortable ideas, even for us. Number one, your way isn't always the best way. Number two, you have to know and admit when you're wrong. And how difficult is that sometimes, right? Knowing when to change opinions, how to change, how to react to different perspectives is a skill that will pay off later in their lives. Next, we have leadership. Leadership is someone's ability for setting goals, walking a team through the steps required, and achieving those goals collaboratively. Initiative. This is also a hard skill to learn and practice. Initiative often means working on projects outside of regular school hours. It implies starting projects, strategies, and plans on their own. And we have to show students that initiative earns rewards. In a school context, I would say good grades are a good reward. Then we have productivity. That's a student ability to complete work in an appropriate amount of time. In business terms, it is called efficiency. And of course, we encourage this when we set deadlines for presentations or specific tasks, and we are always doing that. And there is one last skill that ties all the other 21st skills together, social skills. We are all aware that the rise of social media and instant communication have changed the way we interact. Today's students possess a wide range of social skills, or if we want, social media skills. Some are more adept than others, of course, but I would say most students need a crash course in social skills. Etiquette, manners, politeness, and small talk still play major roles in today's world. And some students need to learn them in an educational setting because they will not learn them anywhere else. And can we contribute to the development of these skills? We already do, and some of them have always been at the heart of education. I'm sure we all have realized that our students today need a new set of skills to prepare them to be successful participants in a global world and in the global society of the future. But let's be serious, we have a busy life. These new skills and concepts are a bit unclear, and we may be struggling with how to implement them in the actual classroom. So we suggest moving to the core skills, the 4 C's of 21st century learning. Often these are considered to be key skills for 21st century learners, and they have been reshaping education all across the world over the last 10 to 15 years. For us, language teachers, a primary challenge is thinking about how we can promote and work with these skills in our own classrooms. So the 4 C's of 21st century learning are communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. So let's focus on the first 2 C's, communication and collaboration. These should be skills that we English teachers are well aware of. Many of the things that we are already doing in the classroom, like pair and group work and project-based learning, are excellent to support the development of communication and collaboration. But when students leave our English classes, we of course want them to have improved their language skills, but we also want them to have developed confidence in their ability to communicate and collaborate in the language. However, getting deep into developing the other C's, critical thinking and creativity, will imply rethinking our approaches, which will be less challenging for us, of course, if we work with engaging materials. So let's take a look at critical thinking and suggestions on how we can work it out in our classroom. Remember this. Remember Bloom's taxonomy? Sure you do. We all have come across it at some point. It would move from surface level to high level thinking skills, from knowledge to comprehension to application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Today's expert suggests an alternative way of looking at Bloom from a 21st century skill perspective, not progressing from the bottom to the top, but embedded within each other, creativity at the center. So what tasks can we associate with each level? Just to remind us, we have remembering. And when we think about this surface level of learning, we can ask students exercises like find, identify, label, list, match, select, number. Then we have understanding and tasks like associate, compare, contrast, describe, distinguish, relate. Next, applying, when we ask them to choose, to complete, to explain, to prepare, to share. Next level is analyzing. And we can ask students to classify, to contrast, to infer, to link, to order, to organize. And then evaluating, assess, consider, comment, debate, justify, persuade, predict, support. And finally, creating tasks like build, compose, design, develop, plan, role play, write, podcast, for example. Okay. So let's pick up critical thinking again. It is definitely one of the 4 C's, and it is one of the valuable thinking skills our students will need in the future. To think critically about an issue or problem means to analyze it from many viewpoints and perspectives with an open mind. This process requires that we or the student analyzes evidence to think through issues and challenges before taking a stand. In truth, critical thinking is a skill built on our ability to conduct careful and thoughtful analysis of issues. So we would place it at this level of the taxonomy. Okay. The good news for us, language teachers, is that the development and practice of critical thinking fits wonderfully in most communicative language teaching curricula. All 4 language skills can easily be activated when students are asked to research a topic, to discuss it, to debate that topic with peers, to write about what they find. And these activities don't require high levels of English proficiency. Students, even at lower level or lower intermediate levels, have meaningful discussions with peers about real issues. So let's think about 4 ways to increase students' critical thinking. Paula, do you want to take over from here?
Sure, Noemia, sure. The first thing we've got to do is to evaluate the questions we are asking. Are your questions crafted to produce detailed, in-depth responses, or do they lead to one-word answers? Do they allow students to draw on their personal experiences or offer their opinions? Do these questions inspire students to passionately debate or to engage in an exchange with a peer? Let's look at an example. Are you a global citizen? It's an important question we usually ask, but it doesn't really require students to offer details about their thoughts or opinions on the matter, and it is unlikely to result in enthusiastic responses. So changing it, for example, to these questions. Being a global citizen, what local issues would you choose to deal with? And which global issues would you be more interested in? Explain your choices. This will directly solicit students' perspectives. These questions will make students think about their own lives, which may keep them more engaged in discussing the topic. Second of all, often place culture at the core of your lessons and units. As language teachers, we are not only responsible for teaching a language, we should also be exposing our students to the cultures associated with the target language and even other cultures. Our students often make deeper connections with cultural aspects of the language rather than with the linguistic ones, right? I think so. So try asking students to make cultural comparisons between their native cultures and the target one, or even with different cultures. This gives them the opportunity to think critically about their own cultures and allows them to recognize that not every culture is the same, but should be respected. The intercultural competence goal in our aprendizagens essenciais by guiding them to be more culturally competent global citizens. Number 3, incorporate authentic resources. There's no better way to expose students to culture and higher order thinking than with authentic resources. Real-life materials such as infographics, articles, songs, films, podcasts, commercials, the list goes on and on. Another way to increase students' critical thinking is by giving students independence. We know it's tempting to lecture students and control the entire class period, but releasing some control may actually be empowering. Let students think independently and let them design their own tasks. Require them to problem solve, give them choices, give them challenges. Let them own their own learning and take an active role in it. And instead of leading every class discussion, assign students different roles in group discussions or allow them to take turns facilitating a whole class discussion. When students are given a chance to lead, they generally do rise to the occasion, which may result in deeper learning. Our last C is creativity, or maybe not the last one. You have to wait until the end of the session to check it out. So why is creativity such an important skill? After all, not all our students are going to be artists, but there are so many advantages in stimulating creativity. First of all, it promotes active learning. By asking students to think outside the box, stray beyond normal assignment guidelines, and use their own creativity, you can keep them focused and active for longer periods of time. It creates a fun and positive learning environment in the classroom. Not only does creativity make classes more enjoyable for students, but it's also more fun for us teachers. Students have so much to offer, and sometimes stepping out of your normal routine and feeding off of the creative energy can do wonders. Fun is really contagious. It also improves language retention. Ultimately, this is what we are after. Our goal is to teach students a language. When the other factors come together, the result will be definitely improved retention due to increased participation, quality assignments, active learning, and fun. So, let's look at 5 suggestions to be creative in our language classroom. Number 1. Skip the routines. Well, we all know routines can be useful. They are a sequence of habits that keep you on track and prevent complications. And not every day has to be a completely unique language experience. A little routine never hurts anyone, but zero creativity can. Because routines are comfortable, sometimes too comfortable, letting students sit back and switch off. One way to keep students on their toes is to do something completely different once in a while. For example, by getting students up and about. For example, take students on a walk around the school or the block, asking them to write down all the words that they see. They then play a game of Pictionary when one student sketches the object that he or she saw, and other students have the chance to guess and correct the term. This activity works well because it's not something that you can do every day. We want to keep students on their toes and remind them to stay alert, because in your classroom, anything can happen. Following this idea of keeping students from getting too comfortable, something else we can do is, for example, invert the routine. You don't have to completely change the routine, just have to change it slightly. For example, do the opposite. Take something familiar and do it different. For instance, if you always teach from the front of the class, try teaching from the back. If your students always sit in rows, try putting them in a circle, why not? Or you can also switch up the order. Do daily activities in a different order. If you usually give homework assignments at the end of the class, for example, give it at the beginning instead. You can also try changing roles. Let students do the work. For example, if you usually write the summary every class or do the roll call, have one of your students do it one day. They'll enjoy it. These are a few simple ideas that require little to no preparation at all and are subtle enough to pull students out of your daily habits. Another thing you can do is give students the power. Students are used to being told what to do and just going with the flow. Take them out of that passive mode by giving them the power. Let them have their say by helping plan the lesson for the next day or the next week. Here are some ways to do so. Let students choose. You can describe 2 assignments and then ask them which exercise they would like to do first. Giving them the chance to choose will instantly wake them back up. Involve students in scheduling. You may present interchangeable topics to the students that you plan to teach the following week, for example. Write the days of the week on the board and then ask students which topics they'd like to learn on which day and have them explain their logic. Write the topics down next to the corresponding day and there you go. You've got a student-made schedule. Number 4, regularly ask for feedback. Ask students if they have a favorite language exercise or assignment. If so, conduct it more frequently. Oftentimes, what they want and what they need are the same thing. They'll be the first to know if they're losing interest or if there's something they don't understand. Okay, you might also try relaxing the rules a little bit. Can you imagine a class of students who are all at the same level and who are all equally proactive? It's hard to envision, right? Well, it's hard to envision because it doesn't exist. There are generally a few students who lead the way and the rest follow suit. But guess what? Creativity can help you solve this challenge. And how? You can, for example, vary the assignment by group. You split the class up and give each group a slightly different set of rules for the same assignment. For example, you can have them create their own advertisements, but give each group a different product or to sell or audience to focus on. Groups won't be able to depend on the example they see around them, and they will be forced to rely on their own understanding and their own creativity. Leave room for interpretation. Once again, split the class up, go around and explain the assignment to each group, giving them this time all the same directions. For example, write a prose poem on a particular issue. Notice how these directions are intentionally vague and limited, allowing for the students to fill in the blanks themselves. Each group will finish with something slightly different or completely different. And finally, number 5, embrace the arts. Perhaps the most straightforward form of creativity is art, which can include stories, plays, music, poems, mime, and dance. These activities require extremely proactive participation and establish a positive classroom environment. Here are some artistic exercises that do just that. React to art. Have students react to art, which can be more or less abstract. It doesn't really matter. Ask open-ended questions like, what do you see here? What is happening? What do you think the message is? And as students will interpret the art differently, you can use the ensuing class discussion to teach or revisit a lesson on politely disagreeing, for instance. You can also ask students to write a poem using a photograph or painting. Ask them to write a short poem to go with the artwork. It's entirely up to you. While engaging with the artwork, they're learning new vocabulary and learning how to express or even defend their opinions. And as we all know, art has a very positive effect on students. They'll become more lively, more talkative. And because art is so thought-provoking and emotional, it does inspire further creativity. It will make students forget that they're learning a language, but will encourage them to use the language so that they can engage with the art.
With these examples, we are almost finishing this session today. And we would like to share a table with you with 12 suggestions to become a better 21st century teacher. It is not of our making, but we think that it fits perfectly within our message. So think beyond your classroom or your subject matter. Include the world in your lesson literally. For example, Skype with a class in a foreign country. Look for ways to get involved with the community. Listen to experiences and people around you. Create with students, teach them how to think outside the box. Let them be creative. Invent. Let students invent new ways to solve old problems. Have a plan B if the technology fails, and it sometimes does. Practice using technology before the class begins. Team up. That means create teaching and learning teams within your class. The arts, for which we have given you some examples, so integrate them. Allow students to express themselves in different ways. Take risks by trying something new. And finally, very important, be willing to throw the lesson out if the class is moving in a better direction. So to add up to these 12 ideas, and while we were thinking about this issue of 21st century skills, and mainly about critical thinking and creativity, 2 other C's showed up. And we think you will agree with them. So the first C, which was part of many of the ideas that we shared with you. So the first C is choices. Giving students the chance to make choices will imply that they take an active role in their learning process and will surely increase their levels of motivation. The other C is something that they have to learn from our example. So it starts with us. And we believe there is no meaningful learning without this particular C, no matter what century we live in. So let's listen to Joe Rule and find out.
You know what I remember about 3rd grade? I remember Jenny on the bus. I'm not kidding. 3rd grade. No, the thing I remember most about the classroom in 3rd grade is I remember our teacher every day after lunch would read to us for 10 to 15 minutes. She would read to us Tom Sawyer. What an adventure. Oh, we had black and white TV, we had cartoons on TV, but this was different. It was obvious to us that Miss Hershey loved reading and she was passionate about reading to us. Tom Sawyer, what an adventure. At the end of the 10-minute reading period, I couldn't wait until the next day to find out what would happen to Tom and his friends. I don't know if Miss Hershey realized it or not. I should have written her a letter a long time ago. She inspired me to be a reader. But you see, she wasn't saddled with state-mandated standards and state-mandated high-stakes standardized testing. And so she was free to teach and inspire. I'll never forget her. She means the world to me. I should have written her a long time ago. Then for that other love, teachers' love for the kids. If there are any teachers in the audience, don't get nervous. I'm not talking about warm, fuzzy, emotional love. I'm talking about genuine, decisional, put the other person first kind of love. It motivates. It inspires in a powerful way. I'm talking about the kind of love that C.S. Lewis wrote about it in his book, The Four Loves. He described it as agape love, the highest level of love known, a self-sacrificial kind of love, a love that's passionately committed to the well-being of the other. This kind of love is not always emotional, but it is always decisional. So teachers, great news. This means you can love your kids even when they're not likable. Does that ever happen? Because this kind of love is not emotional, it's decisional, and it motivates and inspires in a powerful way, and it's as old as the hills. So teachers, an airtight lesson plan is important. A well-organized, consistent discipline plan is important. Effective use of technology is important. The standards are important, but please don't let them stifle your creativity. All these things are important. But what the kids are going to remember most of all is you. Don't forget that sixth C, caring. That is the most effective, most powerful, most inspiring way of teaching, getting their attention, motivating them, inspiring them. What they're going to remember most is that you look them in the eye and ask them about their extracurricular activities and their part-time jobs. What they're going to remember most is that you just asked them in the hall how they were doing. What they're going to remember most is that you worked really hard in the first couple weeks of school to learn their names in the first couple days. What they're going to remember most is that you went to their athletic events and their concerts. What they're going to remember most is that you led the class in loud, off-key choruses of happy birthday. What they're going to remember most is that when they made the newspaper, you put their newspaper clippings up on the wall in the classroom, and you told them to autograph them. And you told them to do that so that someday when their autographs were worth lots of money, it would fund your retirement. What they're going to remember is that you were transparent and that you were real and that you had the ability to laugh at yourself and laugh with them. So what's really important? How do we motivate? How do we inspire? Allow kids to involve themselves in the classroom in student choice, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. But don't forget that sixth C. It's probably the most important one because the greatest of these is love. Thank you.
That's right. The last C is caring. And I guess we all know how important that is. And if we are here today still loving our job despite the difficulties, challenges, and setbacks, it's definitely because we care. So thank you for being here with us. We hope you have enjoyed the session, and we will be with you again very soon to share a new project, a new course book, My Selfie 11. Thank you and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.